I'd like to talk to you this evening. My name is Malcolm, by the way. It's lovely to see you if you're joining us online for the first time. I lead the church here at Gold Hill. Thanks for taking the time to be with us, and thank you too for being here tonight. I really appreciate you taking time to be in this meeting. And I do pray that God will speak to you and that you'll hear his voice. Many, many years ago, there was somebody called Benedict who began a monk's order. He became a leading figure in the church, and millions of people have been impacted by the way that he lived and the lessons that he taught. He set an order and ran a home, a house, where people could come and find refuge. And he gave some instructions to everybody that was part of his monastery, including the porter, and how he was to answer the door. So when somebody came, the porter had to be clear that he could offer a welcome, in Benedict's words, with all gentleness that comes from reverence for God and with the warmth of love. As soon as the porter was to stay close to the door so that he could respond quickly to any knock that might seek shelter or support or help. He wasn't to be too far away. He had to be able to get there quickly so that the door could be opened without too much hesitation. And as soon as anyone knocked on the door, the porter was to reply, "Thanks be to God, your blessing, please." Then he was to make sure that the other monks in the house knew who was coming and that they were ready to give a warm and welcoming embrace or exchange to the visitor. In contrast, the 20th century writer Dorothy Parker used to answer her telephone with this greeting: "What the hell do you want?" I wonder which greeting our lives give to people. How do you answer the door when somebody knocks? And how do we answer the door when someone knocks? As a church family, as individuals, as life groups, as ministries, as businesswomen or businessmen, as mums or dads, as people who are engaged with others, what kind of message do you give to other people when they knock on the door of your life? Is it peace be upon you or blessings to you? An open and warm glance towards someone that lets them know that they have a place? Or is it a rather more viscerous and angry, "What do you want?" My eldest brother struggled with alcoholism all his life. And about 5 years ago, he phoned me. He used to phone me all the time, but he phoned me one Saturday night. He's no longer alive. He phoned me one Saturday night, having had a really difficult time, in desperation, and spoke to me for about an hour. I spoke with him and prayed with him. And he said, "Thank you very much, that's helped." The following afternoon, he called me and he told me this story. The bottom of the lane in Belfast, North Belfast, where my mum lived at the time, and my brother lived not far from her, was a little church. And Colin, that Sunday morning, went down to the church, the first time that he'd ever been in a church service. He walked in the door, he sat down. There was mostly elderly people there. That wasn't their fault. They were chattering and talking to one another and welcoming one another. Then Colin noticed that somebody was walking over towards him with a shirt and a tie on. And it was one of the deacons. He didn't know what that was because he wasn't a Christian, but it was one of the deacons. And they said to him, he sat down beside my brother and said to him, "Hope you don't mind, but you're smelling of alcohol." And Colin said, "That's because I'm an alcoholic." And the deacon, but he said, "I was drunk last night, but I'm not drunk today." And the deacon said, "Well, it's putting some people off. Would you mind leaving?" He never went back to a church. Why would he? He went to a community looking for welcome, and what he got was a response that said, "You're not good enough." Never went back to a church on his own. The year before he died, I was in Ballymena speaking at a big convention, and I was preaching, and about halfway through, I noticed my brother sitting in the congregation with my sister. And he plucked up all of his courage to come into this building because his brother was there, and he wanted to show some level of support. And it helped him immensely. Not me. What helped him immensely was the way they treated him. They were kind, they were gracious. They got him a cup of coffee. They asked him if there was anything that he would need. They made sure that his car was parked. They did everything that you would want to do to send a message to someone that you're welcome here. There's a place for you. Thanks for taking the time to come and to be with us. I thank God for that church. I wrote to the first one. Ended up one weekend going down and having a conversation with the minister in charge. It wasn't their fault. They just didn't know what to do with someone like my brother. So how do we welcome people? We're exploring over these Sunday nights what it means to be a community of grace. And there's no doubt that a community of grace is a welcoming community. It's a community that makes room for people. It's a community that allows space for them, that finds a way of connecting with them. But rather than getting too complicated with this, here's what I want to ask you, those of you that are already Christians. And I'm not assuming everybody is, but it's only a simple question. It's not very complicated. How did God welcome you? What test did you have to pass? What standard of behavior did you have to tick the box of in order for him to first welcome you? What language did you have to get right? I think the welcome of God is an astounding thing to us. When I read the New Testament and when I think about how God has welcomed me, I find my life endowed with the most wonderful beauty just because God has been kind. He took a step toward me before I ever took a step toward him. Before I asked him for forgiveness, he'd already forgiven me. Before I even knew his name, he knew mine. He reached out to me long before I had ever reached out to him. A simple and rudimentary reading of the New Testament reminds us from Luke chapter 19 that Jesus came to seek and to save the lost. Or from Romans chapter 5 that whilst we were still trapped as sinners, God loved us and made a way for us to know him. The old man John, writing to the church in Ephesus, after a life full of encounters with God, said this: he loved us before we loved him. And when Jesus was challenged by the religious people of his day about why he had come and what he was doing, he said to them, the story is told in Luke chapter 5, it's not the healthy who need a doctor, it's the sick. And he was largely criticized because he spent time with the people that the religious people wouldn't spend time with. There's no more welcoming picture of God than Jesus. There's no more welcoming deity in all the religions of the world than the God we serve as Christians in Jesus Christ. But his welcome is strong and robust and challenging. He welcomes us home. He welcomes us into his family. He welcomes us into a relationship with him. And beyond anything else that I cannot comprehend, according to John chapter 15, verse 15, he calls us friends. When you read the passage about that, John 13, 14, 15, 16, and 17, it's taking place just a few days before, just the night before Jesus is crucified, murdered. And what I find staggering about the story is not the grace and the love and the mercy that Jesus shows to his disciples generally, but the grace and the love and the mercy that he shows to one of them. His name is Judas. And Jesus knows that he's going to betray him. We know that because he tells John that the person that he gives a bit of bread dipped into wine to is the one who's going to do the dirty deed on him. And yet when it comes to a moment in an upper room where the guest should have had their feet washed by the host or by a servant, but they'd forgotten because they were too busy talking about themselves, Jesus got up and wrapped a towel around his waist and lifted a bowl of water and washed the feet of every single disciple. And John goes out of his way to tell us that he did the same for Judas. What does it mean to welcome the person who will betray you? And then he turns to his disciples and says, now that you've seen what I have done, you do it too. What does that mean for a Christian in the 21st century? And what does it mean for a church? And what does it mean for you? For how I will live and the choices that I will make. Don't misunderstand what I'm saying to you this evening. God welcomes us, but he doesn't force himself upon us. He offers us his love, but we must accept it. He reaches out to us, but we have to receive it. He challenges our assumptions, and we must let him. He listens to us, but asks that we in return listen to him. He tells us the truth and asks us to make a decision to act upon it. If I was trying to simplify this down, I would put it this way. For every single one of you here tonight, or joining us via the internet around the world, God will take you as far as you will let him. And he will take me as far as I will let him. See, one of the great challenges of the idea of welcome in the church today is that it should mean nothing matters. That no behavior is relevant, that no challenge is laid at your door. That's not true. There's a huge difference between acceptance and agreement. God accepts me where I am. Doesn't mean he agrees with everything I do. And it is as I lay my life down at his feet that he draws me into closer and closer and clearer expression of his purposes. So God will take me as far as I will let him. But the truth is, for you and for me, God is a welcoming God. He welcomed Abraham into his family before there was a family. He welcomed foreigners into his midst. He instructed his people throughout the Old Testament, the Jews, that they were to be welcoming. He told those who came and followed him in his son Jesus that we were to be a welcoming people too. Listening to these words in Matthew chapter 5, Jesus talking to his disciples, if you love those who love you, what reward do you have? Do not even the tax collectors do the same? And if you greet only your brothers, what more are you doing than others? Do not even the Gentiles do the same? So there's a challenge for you and me. How do we welcome and yet at the same time remain clear and faithful to the teaching and promises of Jesus? Does welcoming mean that nothing matters? Does welcoming mean that lifestyle choices are out the window? Does welcoming mean that you never challenge? You never lay truth before anyone? You never set choices before them? You never teach anything around moral decisions or ethics or what it means to live right or wrong? if you read the New Testament pretty straightforwardly, you realize that it can't mean that. So how do we navigate this? I think I want to come back to the idea of friends. It's amazing to me that God would call me his friend. Because friends used to mean something until Facebook came along, didn't they? Most people had a handful of friends that they really enjoyed spending time with. And now we have friends. I was talking to somebody the other day. I had done a cull on my Facebook page because I'd set up a kind of public one and a private one, which was a bit of a disaster. But it's been a helpful thing. But I had thousands and thousands of people sending me messages on Facebook saying, "You've moved me from your private page to a public page. I thought I was your friend." And I had a conversation with somebody recently who was really struggling with this, but in a different way to me. I wanted to kind of have a smaller group of people that I could be more open and honest with, and we could share our journey together. Does that make sense? But my friend, and this was a real friend, my friend said to me, but I don't feel as loved or as valued if I don't have all those, and these were the words that she used, I don't feel as loved or as valued if I don't have as many friends on Facebook as other people that are doing the same job as me. What does it mean to be a friend? What does it mean for you to be a friend to someone? Friends spend time together. Friends tell the truth to one another. Friends don't shy away from honest conversations, do they? Friends don't pretend that it doesn't matter, but they get to the heart of what it means to walk together. The Greek philosopher Plutarch had a really interesting phrase. "I do not need a friend who nods when I nod, or laughs when I laugh, or shouts when I shout," he said. "My shadow does that. I need a friend who will tell me the truth." So how can the church be a friend to society? Do we nod when it nods? Do we laugh when it laughs? Or do we tell it the truth? This amorphous group of people called the church. We're not being friends if we aren't honest. And what about you and about me? The obvious question that I guess many of you will be thinking about is, so Malcolm, I hear what you're saying, and my heart and my head is immediately jumping to the question of, what do I do with someone who tells me that they are gay? And they want to be a leader in my church. And they're in an active same-sex relationship. How do I handle that? Would Jesus give them the job? My honest answer is I don't think so. My honest answer is I think he would tell them the truth. And he would say, I love you enough for you to understand that I completely accept you, but I can't affirm every decision that you make. And I can't send a message to everybody else that it doesn't matter. And I can take you as far as you can go, but you're determining the limits of your participation in this family, not me. Is that being unwelcoming, or is it being a friend who is honest? I want to suggest to you that it's being an honest friend. But don't jump to that question, despite the fact that we inevitably do, because it means that we can avoid the more difficult questions. Because if we can get to that one, we can avoid the question, well, what do I do with my Muslim neighbor? What do I do with the person who I don't like? What do I do with the man who gets on my nerves? What do I do with the folk in work that really get up my nose? How can I be welcoming to the people that I just want to not be welcoming to? And that's where our battle is. Don't jump to the other extreme too quickly, although as a church we have to grapple with it. As a community, we have to ask questions about this, don't we? We can't pretend that these questions don't exist in society and don't exist around us. So let's have a grown-up conversation about it. Let's listen to what the Bible says about being welcoming and loving and honest and truthful. And let's be courageous enough to do what this word says, even if it means that society will laugh at us or tell us that we're crazy. But let's never sound angry. Let's never sound like the mob that don't want other people to be part of our family because we don't like them. Here's a starter for 10. In all that we do and all that we are, let's welcome and embrace other people. Let's actively seek to support them throughout their time as part of this community and to ensure that they feel at home for as long as they are with us and that they can go as far as they want to go and as God will take them. And let's remember that every single person matters in our community. Let's let that be our starter for 10. How can I be welcoming to you? I can offer family, a place at a dinner table, an open door, an hour for a cup of coffee, a moment to listen. I can offer friendship, being interested in not just what you do, but who you are. I could learn some of your children's names and ask you how they're doing at university or what they're doing in the tests and the struggles that they're facing. I could see you as a human being rather than an object that does things for God. I could offer hope just by letting you know that you matter, by telling you that I miss you when you're not here, by taking the time to write you a card on the anniversary of your mother or father or son or husband or wife's death, by remembering important things. We could do that. Let's not try to create a welcoming community without first being welcoming people. And let's remember that acceptance doesn't mean agreement. And welcome doesn't equate with approval. What should we do about people whose lifestyle choices that we disagree with when they come through the doors? Absolutely nothing. That's what we should do. We should throw our arms around them and love them and say, thank you for being here. We should sit with them and listen to them and hear their story and allow them to be defined beyond one or two adjectives that society or they have chosen to use to define themselves. We should let God do his work. And we should preach a gospel that is true and faithful to Scripture. And we should live lifestyles that are open and welcoming and kind and caring and embracing. And let them make the decisions about where the parameters of welcome will end. In other words, we exclude no one. But we recognize that people may exclude themselves. And they may exclude themselves by a moral choice, or by a relational choice, or by a professional choice, or by a financial choice, or by a choice of words or language or 1,000 other things. But we never close the door on them. Why? Because God never closed the door on you. And he's never closed the door on me. You know these posters, I'm sure some of you have seen them. We've got one that is slightly different to what I've written because I've thought about what I want to write here. But in this family, we do. In this family, I think sometimes in an Irish family, it should say, in this family, we do arguments. In this family, we do belligerence. In this family, we do opinionated. In this family, we do I'm always right. That's what it feels like in an Irish family sometimes. Although I have to say that in my family here, it doesn't feel like that, in case you're worried. But when we're writing this on the wall, in this family, We do second chances. We do grace. We do mistakes. We do real life. In this family, we do, I'm sorry, it was my fault. In this family, we do loud really well. Some of you are not so sure about that one. In this family, we do hugs. We do love. We do truth. We do difference. We do forgiveness. We do honesty. We do hope. And we do choices. The hardest thing for someone to do when they're a pastor, I think, is to pour your life into a colleague. And then watch them make a choice which is a disastrous one. And have to let them go. Because when they go, they carry a little bit of your heart with them. And you always want them to come back. But you can't abandon the challenge of the cross. You can't pretend that truth doesn't matter. And you watch someone with beauty and kindness and potential make a choice that you know is a wrong choice. And you realize that you have to let them do it. Because to do anything else would be to control them. And Jesus doesn't control people. It's hard to do welcoming properly. Because there's always an edge to it. And that edge is you've made a choice. That I can't change. But I wish I could. But I'm not you. And when you're a pastor of a congregation, sometimes you have to let them do that too. So being welcoming isn't easy. It's uncomfortable. It's difficult. But it is what we're called to do. I recently read something by the Archbishop of Canterbury. He said this, that he was going through a series for Lent several years ago. And he was reflecting, and he said, Jesus has told me to love my enemies, to love my neighbor, to love my neighbors, to love my brothers and sisters in Christ, to love my friends, and to love myself and to love him. And then he said, who is excluded from that list? No one. Even though someone may choose to walk away from your welcome, they can never walk away from your love. Just keep loving them. Keep the door open. Keep your heart open. Keep your hands open. And keep your prayer life alive for them. And see what God can do with that. I wonder who we exclude. I wonder who you exclude. But I wonder if you felt excluded. As I've been thinking across this week about tonight's message, I've thought, I think there are probably lots of people watching online or will be here tonight who themselves have felt excluded, have felt shut out, not good enough. I'm sorry. Not just on behalf of Gold Hill if we've done that. I'm sorry on behalf of the Church of Jesus Christ if it's done that to you. But let me ask you to lift your eyes to Jesus. Because he's not like that. He is the most forgiving, the most gentle, the most challenging and uncomfortable, and the most loving and kind friend that I have ever met. And if you give him a chance, he will be that kind of friend to you too. I came across this. It's a song, I'm not going to sing it, you'll be glad to know, called The Gospel of Welcome by John Fisher, whom I've never heard of. Welcome, welcome, arms are open wide. Welcome, welcome, there's a warming fire inside. Everything's being done to make a place for you. The war's already won. There's nothing else that you can do but to come in where you know, where we can know you. Let the Father's arms enfold you. Sit down here among your friends where we can all warm our hands on the gospel of welcome. Welcome, welcome. You can come from anywhere. Just turn around and you're already there. It makes no difference who you are or what you might have done. All our sins are weighed just the same when placed upon the Son. And anyone who wants to judge can stay outside and hold a grudge. We're here among our friends where we can all warm our hands on the gospel of welcome. 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 Don't just come alone. The field is waiting patiently and the seed is already sown. Once you've been accepted here, there's no one you can't love. No reason you can't welcome that one you're thinking of. And bring them in to find the love they left behind in this circle among our friends where we all can warm our hands on the gospel of welcome. What's the picture of welcome that I'd like to leave you with as we move to ask you to respond to what God might be saying to you? It didn't take me very long as I thought about my sermon to come up with the picture or the image that I wanted to leave with you. It's the image of a dad whose boisterous young son comes to him and says, "Hey, Pop, I don't want to wait until you die. I want the money and I want it now. I want all the spondulics that I'm due because I'm off to party." And the dad says, "Okay." Probably broken-hearted. Probably wishing that he wouldn't do it, but treating him like an adult. And lets him go. And the young fella runs off. He thinks, yeah, this is the life. Suddenly, he's Mr. Popular. Bacardi Breezer boy. J2O King, for those of you that are offended by alcohol. As long as he's buying the vodkas and cokes and the brandies and gingers, he's everybody's friend. As long as he's making them laugh, as long as he's supplying them with what they want, they're going to be his best buddy. Then his money runs out. And when his money runs out, his friends run out. And when his friends run out, his joy runs out. And then he finds himself taking a job eating the scraps from the bins of a farm, scavenging around like an animal would, not a human being. And in the midst of his misery, covered in muck and dirt and failure and utter aloneness, he has this outrageous thought. Maybe I can get back to home. And maybe Dad will let me work in the kitchen. He'll give me a little tithe cottage somewhere and I can tend to some ground. So he makes his way back. And long before he ever gets there, perhaps it was his walk. Perhaps it was the way he held his shoulders. I could tell you what my children walk like. I could certainly tell you what they laugh like. I could be in a room like this and I could hear one of them say, Dad, and I would know it was them. When I was a baby, when they were babies, and they were in the creche or in another room, and they all started to cry at once, Debbie and I knew when one of ours was crying. Because you do, don't you? You hear their cry above everybody else's. This boy is walking back home, hoping for a second-class table in a third-class house because his dad couldn't possibly want him. And his dad has been waiting for so long. Maybe every day he's come down to the entrance to the estate. He stood at the gate. Maybe he set a place at the table every day, saying maybe today he'll come back. Maybe today he'll make his way home. And every day he went back home probably disappointed. But as the boy makes his way along the path, he sees someone running toward him in the distance. And then he realizes it's his dad. And the father doesn't say, I'll give you a second-class job and a third-rate part of my estate. He says, come home. Because you've always been welcome. You're always going to be welcome. You're never going to be excluded from my family. The only thing that excluded you was you. And now that you've overcome that, you're welcome. And he wraps his arms around them and he puts his ring in his finger, gives him a new pair of Russell and Bromley shoes, takes him in, orders a couple of fillet steaks, and has a party. Maybe you've been in the distant country. Maybe you've had enough of the pig swill. Or maybe you're still in the place where you think that your choices were right because you've still got people around you that are approving of you. Let God welcome you back. Let God wrap his arms around you. Whatever the mistake, whatever the problem, whatever the issue, let him wrap his arms around you. And maybe you could wrap your arms around somebody else, eh? About 25 years ago, there was a Spanish man whose son went missing. He searched for him for years and years, could never find him. And then he heard a rumor that his son, whose name was Pedro, had appeared in Madrid. So the dad put an ad in the biggest paper, the paper with the biggest circulation in Madrid, that said, Pedro, I still love you. If you want to make contact, I'll meet you in the plaza outside a hotel that he named at 2 o'clock on Friday. 600 boys called Pedro turned up. Let's be a welcoming church for the Pedros that have no one else. And if you're that person, why don't you let God welcome you? Let's pray. I want you each to think of someone that has wandered away. Let's let God take them as far as they would let him. And I don't want you to use their names. I just want you to take a moment and pray for them. Maybe it's your boy, your son, your daughter, your husband, your wife, your friend. Your mum, your dad, a friend from church, a friend from work. Just ask God to draw them back. And think about how you might be a welcoming voice or a welcoming hand or a welcoming smile.